I walked into Christmas dinner 12 minutes late, and my dad accused me of stealing $2.4 billion before I had even taken off my coat. What surprised me was how calm my body felt. No shaking, no heat rising behind my eyes, just the quiet click of something final, like a ledger closing. If you have ever been erased by your own family, you already know the feeling. If you have not, stay with me. You might recognize the shape of something you have lived through in a different form. I slipped my coat over the back of the nearest chair in my grandma's dining room, the one facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the black winter water off the north shore of Massachusetts. The tide was low that night. The rocks were exposed, dark and glossy under the porch lights. I remember thinking they looked like vertebrae, a spine laid bare. My mom gave me a polite, brittle smile as I walked in. My dad did not bother with the smile. He simply said, "You are late," as if I had disrupted a board meeting instead of a family holiday. My brother kept his eyes down on his plate, cutting into a piece of roasted salmon so carefully you would think it might explode. He had always been precise enough to avoid choosing sides. I took my seat. My grandma sat at the head of the table, wrapped in a soft gray shawl that made her look smaller than she actually was. Her breathing was steady but shallow, something I had learned not to comment on. I had been the only one taking her to appointments the past year, the only one who noticed the way she sometimes gripped the armrest of her chair a little too tightly. She rested her hand on the table and said softly, "Let's begin." There was something in her voice that made everyone look up. Maybe it was the tone, or maybe it was the timing. The plates had not even cooled. Dessert had not been brought out, but she pressed her fingertips together and nodded toward the man seated to her right, the man most people at that table assumed was just another holiday guest. He stood up. His name was Anthony Carlisle, my grandma's lawyer for more than 20 years. I had seen him in her home office more times than I could count. He had the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to litigating high-stakes disputes. And he did not wait for dramatic effect. He simply opened a folder and began to read. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Lowell. The entirety of her estate, valued at approximately $2.4 billion, along with controlling interest in Lowell Maritime Holdings, is hereby granted to her granddaughter, Kelly." There was a moment, exactly 1 second long, where no one breathed. Then everything detonated. My dad shoved back his chair so hard it scraped across the hardwood like a warning shot. My mom gasped, loudly enough that it sounded rehearsed. My brother's fork clattered onto his plate, a clean metallic sound that somehow cut through the shouting that followed. My dad pointed at me with a shaking hand. "She stole from us, behind our back." His voice cracked on the word stole. Not because he was crying, but because he was furious that he had lost control of the narrative. My mom turned toward the extended family, practically trembling. "She manipulated her. She has been scheming for years." I sat there, hands folded neatly in my lap. I know that sounds strange, but I have been a financial analyst long enough to understand that the moment someone starts screaming accusations, you do not respond emotionally. You document. You observe. You wait for the real numbers to surface. Emotions are volatile. Facts are not. The room shifted around me. The chairs moved. People stood. A cousin I barely spoke to murmured something about always knowing I was trouble. An uncle shook his head and said it was disappointing but not surprising. These were people who had not texted me in months, yet they were ready to declare judgment within seconds. It felt less like betrayal and more like confirmation. A balance sheet I had avoided reviewing finally totaled out, and the deficit was permanent. My dad leaned over the table, his face flushed. "Tell them the truth, Kelly. Tell them what you did." I opened my mouth, not to defend myself, but to exhale, because there was nothing I could say that would matter to them at that moment. They had already decided I was guilty. Decision first, evidence later. It was the same pattern I had seen in my family for years. The same lack of due diligence that had wrecked more than one holiday and more than one relationship. My grandma lifted her hand slightly, the way she used to when she wanted to speak during shareholder meetings. Even diminished by age, she still carried that quiet authority. "Enough," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Sit down." But my dad did not sit down. He jabbed a finger at me again. "She got to you. She got into your accounts, into your mind. She made you believe things that are not true. It would have been funny if it had not been so predictable. The idea that I, a woman who had been ignored for most of her life, had somehow orchestrated a takeover of a $2.4 billion empire through manipulation. If I truly had that level of influence, I would not have been eating reheated pasta alone most nights in my one-bedroom apartment in Salem. The lawyer, still standing, raised a hand. His expression did not change, but his voice grew firm. "Please sit down." This was planned. Everything stopped. My dad froze. My mom's mouth snapped shut. Even the cousin who had been whispering about me earlier leaned back like someone had pulled a string in her spine. The room did not go silent. Silence would have implied peace. This was a suspension, the kind that happens seconds before a verdict is read. My grandma looked at me, her eyes clear in a way I had not seen in months. Not soft, not sympathetic. Focused. There was a ledger there, too. One she had been keeping long before tonight, and the numbers were no longer in their favor. I swallowed once. My throat felt oddly cold, the kind of cold that comes right before clarity. Here is the part where I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, but I did not. I felt something closer to recognition, because this was not sudden. This was not a twist in the third act. This was the inevitable conclusion of a pattern I had tracked quietly for years. My family had spent a long time moving assets of affection and loyalty away from me. Tonight was simply the night they stopped pretending. The lawyer closed the folder slowly, as if giving the room a chance to absorb those 3 quiet words. This was planned. I realized then that he did not mean the will. He meant the evening, the timing, the seating, the structure of the explosion. I could already feel the shape of what was coming. Not the details, but the trajectory. Because families like mine do not implode gracefully. They unravel. And when they unravel, the truth does not just come out. It spills, it stains, it spreads. My grandma folded her hands in her lap, a gesture I recognized instantly. It meant she was ready to continue. My dad opened his mouth again, gearing up for a second round of the same accusations, but the lawyer lifted his hand again with a look that said the next phase was already set in motion. I sat back slightly, the way I do when I am reviewing a portfolio and waiting for the last piece of data that will determine whether the risk was worth it. Because I could tell something else was coming. Something none of them had accounted for. And in a strange way, neither had I. That was the moment I realized this story was not just about inheritance. It was about erasure. About the quiet, deliberate way a family can make someone disappear long before they ever try to remove them from a will. I drew in a slow breath. The room smelled like pine from the Christmas tree and roasted salmon cooling on the plates. Ordinary smells for a moment that changed everything. The lawyer placed one hand on the back of his chair, steady and deliberate, as if preparing to reveal the next page in a very different kind of audit. I remember staring at that hand longer than I meant to. Something in the stillness of it reminded me of childhood, of moments when I had waited for an answer that never came. The lawyer inhaled as if he was about to speak, but before he did, the room shifted in a way I cannot fully explain. It felt like a tide pulling backward, exposing everything underneath. And in that brief pause, something opened in my memory, sharp and unwelcome, returning me to a place I had not visited in years. I had always been the child who arrived too late for the photograph. That was the first lesson I learned in my family. If you are not centered in the frame, you might as well not exist. I saw it happen again and again growing up. There would be a family picture on the mantle, and somehow, without fail, I would be the one cropped out when it was reprinted. Or my head would be tilted at an odd angle, and my mom would say it ruined the symmetry. Or the story of the day that photo was taken would later be told in a way that made it clear my presence had been incidental. When I turned 8, I brought home a ribbon from a regional math competition. I placed second. My dad stared at the ribbon the way he stared at meaningless figures on a budget sheet. Then he asked where the first place winner was from. I told him Andover. He nodded once and said that made sense. I remember standing in the kitchen holding that ribbon like it had suddenly become a receipt for something no one wanted to buy. Years later, in high school, I made the honor roll every semester. My mom hung my brother's football photos in the hallway, but mine were stored in a box beneath the guest bed. Not maliciously, not dramatically, just quietly, as if she could not decide whether they mattered. That pattern follows you. Even when you grow up, earn a degree, rent your own apartment, and build a career analyzing other people's value, you carry the early impression that your own value is negotiable. I had learned to live with it, or rather, learned to step around it the way you step around a loose tile on the floor. You know where it is. You know not to put your weight on it. What I did not know was how thoroughly my grandma had noticed. In the year leading up to that Christmas dinner, I had been visiting her every Sunday afternoon at her home office overlooking the inlet. The house was far too large for her, but she refused to move. She said the water helped her think. I believed her. She had the mind of someone who could sit very still and see patterns most people missed. My role in those visits was simple. Help with her emails, sort mail, organize legal documents, make tea. Nothing dramatic, nothing important in the way my family defined importance. It was, however, the only time I felt seen without effort. One Sunday in late September, around 3 in the afternoon, I sat beside her while she scanned a contract. Her reading glasses rested low on her nose and she tapped the margin with a pen. Lightly, in a rhythm I recognized as concentration, she asked without looking up, "Does your dad know you are here this often?" Remember answering carefully. "He knows I visit you, but I do not think he keeps." She nodded and paused. She did not elaborate. She rarely did, but her silence was rarely empty. It usually meant she was marking something internally the way she would mark an erroneous figure in a balance sheet. She always noticed the patterns long before she said them out loud. Another sentence, I found her sitting at her desk, staring at a stack of envelopes that had not been opened. I asked if everything was all right. She gestured toward the letters. "Read me the ones from the board. I want to know what they are saying about the September numbers." So I opened them one by one, reading summaries aloud. She closed her eyes while listening, as if processing each detail against a dataset she already had in her mind. When I finished, she said in that soft, even tone she often used with me, "You see the discrepancies?" I hesitated. Then I did what I always do. I analyzed it. There are inconsistencies in the expense reports. Something is bleeding out on the operation side. "Good," she said. "You see it?" I almost laughed because it felt like a math teacher validating a student for catching a misplaced decimal. But there was something else beneath her voice, something heavier. "What do you think caused it?" she asked. I explained my theory, cautious not to overstep. She listened with her eyes focused on some point past my shoulder. When I finished, she rested her hand on the desk. "That is what I thought too." She did not say more, and I did not press her. I had learned long ago that she preferred letting people reveal themselves over time. She respected the natural pace of truth. By late autumn, our Sundays had settled into a ritual. I arrived around 2. I brewed tea, usually chamomile or Earl Grey. I sorted mail into 3 neat piles. She opened envelopes in slow, deliberate motions. Sometimes she asked me to read a paragraph aloud. Sometimes she asked questions that felt disconnected until much later. One afternoon she asked, "Do you ever feel overlooked?" It startled me. Not because the answer was unclear, but because she had asked the question at all. It felt too direct. Too close to something I had learned to keep folded inside. I remember saying, "I have learned to get comfortable with being the last person anyone counts." She did not smile. She did not reassure me. She simply observed. That is not a comfortable place to be, even if you think you have accepted it. I shrugged, trying to sound practical. It is manageable. She looked at me then. Really looked, with that sharp intelligence that had carried her through decades of building a maritime empire. It is survivable. That is different. Her words stayed with me for days, maybe because no one in my family had ever acknowledged that survival and belonging were 2 different currencies. Now, sitting at her dining table on Christmas night, with the weight of the will announcement still vibrating through the room, I realized those Sunday afternoons had been something else entirely. There had been an audit, a quiet, meticulous audit of character, loyalty, and truth. My dad stood stiffly across the table, jaw locked tight, as if holding himself together by sheer will. My mom's hands kept fluttering to her necklace, a nervous habit she had passed to me. My brother sat frozen, eyes darting between them and the lawyer. The lawyer began to shift the folder in his hands, preparing to continue. But the pause, long and heavy, pulled me deeper into another memory. I was 12 the day I discovered the missing photo. It had been taken during a family trip to Maine. We had stood on the pier near Portland Head Light. My dad had asked a stranger to take our picture. I was excited because the lighthouse looked like it came from a postcard. When the photo was printed and framed, I noticed immediately that the version on the wall did not match my memory. My brother stood on the left. My parents stood in the middle. The right side of the frame ended abruptly. Just when I asked about it, my mom told me it had been cropped for aesthetic balance. It looked better this way. You understand. Sometimes less is more. I didn't, but looking back, standing there at 28, watching the people who raised me turn on me without hesitation, I realized there had been a long training period in my life. Years of small erasures. Moments where my presence had been treated as optional, removable, inconvenient. My grandma had seen all of it, not by watching the moments themselves, but by watching the shape of me, the way I moved through the world, the way I stepped around expectations like that loose tile I mentioned earlier, the way I took up as little emotional space as possible because I had been taught that. On a Sunday in early November, just past 3:30 in the afternoon, the sun already low over the inlet, she asked me to make tea. When I brought the cup to her, she held it without drinking and said, "Do you think you would ever want to run something? A business? A department? Anything that requires responsibility?" I thought she meant my job, so I said, "Maybe someday. I like structure. I like clarity." She nodded slowly. "I know you do." When she spoke again, her voice had softened. "Clarity is expensive. Most people are not willing to pay for it." I had no idea then what she was preparing me for. The air in the dining room grew tighter now, the kind of tension that fills a room before a storm breaks. The lawyer finally spoke, his tone measured. "There is additional information that needs to be reviewed." My dad clenched his fists. My mom's eyes widened. My brother looked down again, shoulders tense. My grandma leaned back in her chair, her breathing controlled. Her gaze flicked to me for just half a second, long enough for me to understand the truth I had missed for years. She had been watching everything. Not to judge me, not to test me, to assess the truth of the people around me. She had seen the imbalance in our family long before any camera recorded it. She had seen who withdrew and who deposited, who counted and who erased. She had known the numbers were skewed. I felt a strange steadiness settle in me. Not confidence, not triumph, something quieter, something like the first clean row of figures after weeks of reconciling a messy account. She saw everything. She always had. And now, finally, the rest of them were about to see it too. The lawyer opened the folder again, and the next page caught the light. I inhaled, preparing for whatever came next. But before he spoke, my grandma's eyes opened fully, clear and steady, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. The lawyer nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then lifted a document so neatly that it felt ceremonial. He said, "Before we proceed, I need to remind everyone of the consent forms signed in early 2020 regarding security upgrades to this property." My dad reacted instantly, a sharp inhale followed by a brittle laugh that did not belong in a dining room. "We never agreed to anything invasive. We signed for cameras at the entrances, not surveillance." The lawyer did not flinch. He placed the document on the table, turning it so that my dad could see it clearly. "This is your signature. You signed acknowledging expanded coverage for internal monitoring systems for safety purposes. The language is clear." My dad leaned forward, squinting at the page as if the text would rearrange itself to support his. "Outrage. That is misleading. This is not what we agreed to. I want this stopped right now." The lawyer remained still, hands loosely resting at his sides. "You may disagree with the interpretation, but the legal standing is sound. The footage is admissible for estate review and family proceedings." My mom shot up from her chair so quickly that the silverware rattled. "You cannot show videos without our permission. This is a violation. We will contest this. We will sue." The lawyer spoke evenly. "You are welcome to pursue any legal action after tonight, but nothing being shown violates the consent agreements signed in 2020. Mrs. Lowell retained full rights as the property owner." My dad opened his mouth again, but my grandma lifted a hand. That small gesture was enough. He shut his mouth, though the anger did not leave his face. His jaw tightened. His fists clenched against the tablecloth. If he could have shredded the paper with willpower alone, he would have. The lawyer pressed a button on a small remote I had not noticed before. The television mounted on the wall near the doorway flickered to life. The family shifted, chairs scraping, voices quieting in jagged murmurs. Then the first video began to play. It was a recording from inside the kitchen, dated January 15th, 2021, 12:48 in the afternoon. The timestamp glowed at the bottom of the screen like an accusation all its own. My dad stood near the island, arms crossed. My mom leaned against the counter holding a mug of coffee. Their expressions were familiar, the expressions they used when they believed they were speaking safely behind closed doors. My dad said we need to phase her out. My mom nodded slowly. "I know, but we have to be careful. She notices things." He shook his head, dismissing it. "She notices the wrong things. She is emotional, soft. If we create enough distance, she will eventually walk away on her own." My mom lowered her voice, but the microphone caught every word with crystalline clarity. "People forget the ones who stay quiet. Let her fade. Let them forget she exists." Someone gasped in the dining room. It might have been my aunt. Or maybe it was one of my cousins. My brother sat very still, shoulders rigid, as if he had been dropped into a body he did not know how to operate. I watched the footage without moving, without blinking. Hearing those words spoken so plainly felt like reviewing a year's worth of financial statements and discovering that the discrepancy you suspected was not accidental. It had been engineered. Not suddenly, systematic. My dad in the recording exhaled, shaking his head in frustration. "She is in the way. She always has been. Once Mom is gone, we will restructure everything. She will not be part of the plan." My mom touched his arm lightly. "We just need to keep her at a distance until then." The video ended. The room did not make a sound for several seconds, not even the sound of breathing. It felt like the entire dining room had dropped into negative space, suspended between denial and realization. I was not sure what expression my face held. Probably nothing. I had learned long ago how to keep my internal calculations private. It is a skill you develop when you grow up, measuring every reaction to avoid being labeled dramatic or sensitive or too much. But inside, something aligned. A clean line. A balancing entry. The numbers that had not made sense for years suddenly resolved themselves. My dad recovered first. He slammed his palm against the table hard enough that the wine glasses trembled. "This is ridiculous. Completely taken out of context. I was frustrated, that is all." My mom stepped forward, her voice cracking. "We never meant any harm. You know how families talk. People vent. This means nothing." The lawyer kept his eyes on them, his posture still as calm as a neutral auditor. "The context will become clearer as we continue." My brother finally looked up. His face was drained of color. His eyes moved from my dad to my mom to the screen, then to me. He seemed to be searching for something, maybe the version of events he had been told versus the one unfolding in front of him. My cousin whispered something under her breath that I did not fully catch, but I heard the words, "Always knew trouble." They drifted across the table like static. My dad pointed sharply at the lawyer. "Turn that off. Right now. You have no right to manipulate our private conversations." The lawyer responded with the same quiet patience he had maintained all the day. "Evening. I am presenting material that directly relates to the succession of this estate and the well-being of the primary beneficiary. The deceased required these recordings to be reviewed in the event of contest or conflict." My dad's voice rose. "We are not contesting. We are clarifying. That footage is meaningless." I looked at him. Really looked. The way I used to examine a questionable spreadsheet. There was fear in his eyes, buried beneath the anger. The fear of exposure, the fear of losing control over a narrative he believed he owned. My mom rubbed her temples, her breathing shallow. "This is a misunderstanding. Kelly, you know we never meant anything like that. You know how people talk when they are stressed. My name in her mouth felt strange, like a number misread in a calculation. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Not because I lacked words, but because the truth was speaking loudly enough for all of us. The lawyer did not restart the footage yet. He simply waited. That was the thing about him. He knew when a moment needed space. He understood tension the way a good financial analyst understands market fluctuations. You cannot rush a revelation. You let it land. I sat back slightly, hands still calm in my lap. I was aware of my heartbeat, steady and even. I should have felt shaken, angry, humiliated. Instead, I felt clarity. Cold, quiet clarity. The accusation that I had somehow stolen billions was not about money. It was a pretext, a cover, a shortcut to push me out before anyone asked questions they did not want to answer. They had not been afraid that I manipulated my grandma. They had been afraid that I mattered. My dad's voice broke through the silence. You are twisting this into something it is not. Families talk. Families vent. This is not proof of anything. My grandma's voice answered him, soft but unwavering. It is proof of intent. My dad froze. Even my mom stopped breathing for a second. My grandma continued, folding her hands with that deliberate composure she had always carried. I listened. For a long time. I listened to how you spoke when you believed no one heard you. And I listened to how she showed up when no one asked her to. Her gaze flicked to me again, clear and unblinking. I felt it settle like a confirmation. A stamp on a document long overdue. The lawyer resumed. He lifted another page, preparing to move forward. But in that brief pause, something happened in the room. A shift so small, it might have been invisible to anyone who was not paying attention. The kind of shift you only catch when you have lived your entire life watching. People recalibrate their emotions around you. It was the silence. Heavy, tight, unignorable. Not defensive, not outraged. Something closer to realization. My dad's chest rose and fell sharply. My mom stared down at her hands. My brother looked like a child who had been told the truth about something he had built his whole identity around. They all understood, even if they would never admit it. The word thief had never been literal. It had been strategic. If they painted me as untrustworthy, manipulative, dangerous, then no one would question why they wanted me gone. If they erased me loudly, they could avoid explaining why they had been erasing me quietly for years. The lawyer lifted the remote, and the next clip appeared before anyone had fully recovered from the first. The dining room lights reflected off the screen, catching at the corners of crystal glasses and the polished silverware. My breath felt steady in my chest, even though I could sense the tremor running through everyone else at the Bluss table. It was strange how calm I felt. Maybe shock has a way of clarifying things rather than clouding them. Or maybe I had always known, somewhere deep down, that none of this was new. The screen shifted to an older timestamp. April 16th, 2020, 9:17 in the morning. The image showed the upstairs hallway just outside my grandma's sitting room. My dad was holding a large leather album, the kind with thick pages and gold-trimmed corners, the kind that used to sit on the coffee table for holiday guests to flip through. He opened it. He paused at a page where a photo used to be. The rectangular outline was empty. He slid a picture out of the sleeve on the next page. My face smiled back from it. I was maybe 9, holding a sparkler on the 4th of July. My dad glanced around, then pulled a small pair of scissors from his pocket. Precision cuts. One line, another. He separated me from the rest of the group, leaving behind my brother and my parents standing in perfect formation without me. My stomach did not drop. It did not twist. Instead, I felt a cold acceptance move through me. Watching it now, I realized that the erasure had begun far earlier than the accusations tonight. They had been editing me out of family history long before they tried to do it, legally. My dad slid the photo with my brother and my parents back into the album. Then he tucked the tiny cutout version of me into the trash bin near the window. He closed the album with a satisfied motion, carried it downstairs, and set it neatly back on the table like nothing had happened. Someone murmured quietly near the far end of the dining table. I was not sure who. My mom pressed her lips together, her face turning pale. She whispered something to my dad, but he did not answer. The next clip appeared. November 7th, 2021, 3:10 in the afternoon. The camera angle was from the large sitting room with the blue upholstered sofas, where my mom often hosted her relatives when they visited. My mom sat with my aunt and 2 cousins, sipping tea and speaking in that careful, sweet tone she used when she wanted to appear gracious. My aunt asked how I was doing. My mom smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had no warmth behind it. "She has always struggled," she said softly. "You know how sensitive she can be. She takes things the wrong way. It is difficult to have her around sometimes. I worry about her stability." My cousins nodded sympathetically. They did not know me well enough to challenge it. They only saw the version my mom crafted. My aunt asked if I would be at Thanksgiving. My mom sighed, as if the question itself was a burden. "She is unpredictable. She disappears for months, then shows up emotional. It is easier for everyone if we keep space." It was fascinating in a way, hearing my mom talk about me as if I were a problem to be managed, a file too messy to open, a loss to be written off. The clip ended. My mom dabbed her eyes at the table now, though I did not see any tears. "I never meant anything harmful. I was just venting. Families do that." No one responded. Even the people who wanted to defend her could not seem to find the words. The lawyer pressed the button again. August 22nd, 2022, 7:49 in the evening. My dad was sitting in my grandma's study with a stack of legal folders spread across the desk. He was reviewing pages with a notepad beside him. The camera captured everything. He said, "We need to restructure the trust. If she is listed as a primary beneficiary, it complicates everything. It gives her leverage she does not deserve." The attorney sitting across from him, a man I did not recognize, shook his head. "Your mother controls the trust. Any amendment requires her approval." My dad leaned forward, lowering his voice. "She is getting older. Her judgment is not what it used to be. I need to create a plan for what happens after she is gone. If we remove Kelly now, it prevents a legal fight later. It keeps everything clean." The attorney asked, "On what grounds would you remove her?" My dad exhaled, irritably. "She is not involved. She does not contribute. She has no long-term investment in the family's future. She is an outsider. It is better this way." The lawyer at our table, the one presenting the footage tonight, made a small notation in the folder. My dad's face flushed when he saw it. My mom spoke up again. "This is being twisted. He was under stress. He did not mean it." But her voice lacked conviction. Every sentence she offered sounded thinner than the last, as if she knew each clip chipped away at the story she and my dad had rehearsed for years. The lawyer clicked the remote. The next clip appeared. March 3rd, 2023, 11:22 in the morning. My parents stood in the dining room of this same mansion, but the atmosphere then was different. Brighter, less tense. They believed they were undisputed heirs to everything. My dad spoke into his phone, pacing. "We need to explore legal erasure, adult estrangement options, something that prevents her from making claims after mom is gone." Legal erasure. The term hung in the air even now, heavy and absurd. Something you hear in a dystopian book, not spoken casually by your own parent. My mom said quietly, "She will not fight. She avoids conflict. If we make things distant enough, she will walk away on her own." People forget the quiet ones. Then my dad lowered his voice further. "Good. The fewer attachments she has, the cleaner the transition. We cannot let her complicate the estate." My brother made a noise beside me, a small exhale that sounded like the breath had been knocked from him. He looked down at his hands. I saw the tremor in his fingers even from across the table. He opened his mouth as if to speak. My dad snapped, "Sit down." My brother flinched, shoulders tightening. He lowered himself back into the chair slowly, carefully, as if the act required negotiation. His eyes did not lift from the tablecloth. I felt a warmth in my chest then, but not a comforting one. Something closer to grief mixed with recognition. I had been watching my brother struggle to navigate loyalty and truth since we were children. He had never challenged my dad openly, not once. Tonight he almost did, and the look on his face told me he wished he had. The lawyer paused the footage. "These recordings represent a sampling of discussions over the past 5 years. There is more, but the pattern is consistent. 5 years. A campaign built over half a decade. Strategic, methodical. Not spontaneous emotional outbursts, but planned removal. I realized, sitting there, that they had not been reacting to anything tonight. They were executing a plan that had been in place long before I walked through the door. My dad's voice cut through the tension again. "This is ridiculous. You are making this appear intentional. We were under pressure. Families talk. You are misrepresenting everything." My grandma spoke softly again. "No, it is exactly what it appears to be." My dad's expression hardened. I saw something break in his eyes. Not regret, not guilt, something closer to panic. The understanding that the narrative he had spent years constructing was slipping away. I glanced at my brother. He was staring at the paused frame of the dining room footage, jaw tight, hands clasped. His knuckles were white. He looked like someone trying to understand how the ground beneath him had shifted without warning. The lawyer closed the folder for a moment, letting the silence settle. He did not need to offer commentary. The evidence was the commentary. The progression of timestamps told a story more damning than any accusation could. 2020. Removing photos. 2021. Damaging my reputation to extended family. 2022. Attempting to alter the trust. 2023. Discussing legal erasure. Each clip is a layer in a strategy designed to make me disappear. Quietly, efficiently, permanently. I felt my breath move steadily in and out. I was not shaking. I was not stunned. What surprised me most was how unsurprised I felt. Watching the footage was like reviewing a complex formula only to discover every variable had been pointing to the same answer all along. My mom tried again, her voice trembling. "Kelly, you know we never wanted to hurt you. We were worried about you. You take things so personally." I looked at her without speaking. It struck me that she believed this line would work, that the problem was my sensitivity, not her actions, that if she framed it as concern, she could avoid the weight of accountability. But worry is not the same as removal. Concern does not require rewriting history. My dad leaned back, crossing his arms, trying to regain control. "You are blowing this out of proportion. These were conversations during stressful periods. They mean nothing." My grandma inhaled slowly, then said, "They mean everything." Her voice cut through the room with more force than raised voices ever could. The lawyer lifted the remote again. "There is one more section to review before we move forward." My dad shook his head, but he did not argue. For the first time all evening, he seemed unable to summon a coherent defense. My brother finally looked at me. His eyes were raw, haunted. "I did not know," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed him. I sat a little straighter. A small shift, barely noticeable, but enough for me to feel it. The truth had momentum now, and I did not have to push it. It was moving on its own. 5 years. They had engineered 5 years of quiet erasure. And the horrifying part was how easily I could have missed it. The lawyer pressed play again. And the next clip began. The next clip opened without warning, the screen shifting from the frozen frame of that paused dining room to a darker room lit by a single overhead pendant. I recognized the space immediately. My grandma's private study. The one none of us were supposed to enter without permission. The one she kept locked for years. The timestamp read February 11th, 2023, 8:26 in the evening. My dad stood near the wall safe, shoulders squared, his expression tight. My uncle, whose presence had been quiet all night until this moment, moved beside him with a small notepad in hand. My dad said, "Do you remember the last code she used?" My uncle flipped through the pages of his notepad. "Try the one from the Vineyard House." My dad entered a series of numbers. The safe beeped, then clicked open. My breath caught in my throat. Inside were velvet boxes, jewelry wrapped carefully in soft cloth, and the unmistakable glint of gold. My grandmother's most valuable pieces. Items I had seen her wear at holidays and charity events. Items she had stored with the kind of reverence only sentiment can give. My dad reached in, lifted a small jewelry case, and handed it to my uncle. My uncle opened it. Inside lay the sapphire bracelet she used to call her lucky charm. I remembered asking her about it once. She said she wore it the day she started her company and the day she signed. The contract that changed everything. My uncle said this one should cover at least 100,000, maybe 120. My dad nodded, pulling out another small box. We need 480,000. Minimum. The investor is not waiting. If we do not put something up soon, the deal collapses. My uncle blew out a breath, anxious. Marcus cannot recover from another failure. He is already barely holding it together. The dining room air grew cold behind me. I felt it settle along my spine. My dad continued. He will not be blamed for this. We just need to stabilize the numbers long enough for him to present a confident front. After that, we find a buyer, my uncle said. And if anyone notices the jewelry is missing, my dad did not look concerned. They will assume Kelly took it. She visits the most. She always moves things around to help Mom with cleaning. No one will question it. People assume the worst of the quiet ones. Something in me lurched. A slow, heavy realization. They had rehearsed this. They had planned not only to take my grandma's jewelry, but to assign the blame to me. Before anything had even gone missing, they had already chosen the thief. They had chosen me. In the clip, my dad removed the last box from the safe and packed everything into a black bag. He zipped it closed with a brisk motion, the sound almost sharp enough to cut through the room. My uncle asked, "What if she pushes back?" My dad shrugged. She avoids conflict. If we shame her enough, she will retreat. She always does. The video froze. The image of my dad holding the bag of stolen jewelry stayed on the screen as the dining room fell into a stunned silence that felt almost physical, pressing against the ribs. My mom covered her mouth with her hands. Her eyes darted toward my dad, then to the screen, then back again. Her voice, when it came, was thin. This is not what it looks like. But her words had already fallen apart before they reached the table. My dad inhaled sharply. This is being taken out of context. We were going to return everything. We just needed collateral. It was temporary. The lawyer's voice remained steady. These items were reported missing 6 months ago. There was no indication they would ever be returned. My dad's face tightened. We did not report it. Someone else did. The lawyer corrected him quietly. Your mother did. She filed a report after noticing the safe had been accessed. My uncle shifted in his chair, sweat forming along his hairline. We were trying to help Marcus. He was under too much pressure. My brother's head jerked up. What pressure? I did not ask for this. My dad cut him off. You were drowning. We stepped in. If you had handled things properly, we would not have needed to. My brother's face flushed. I saw his throat tighten, the way it always did when he was trying not to cry. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers trembled on the edge of the table. The lawyer pressed the remote again. The next clip appeared. February 12th, 2023, 1:14 in the afternoon. My dad and my uncle sat inside a jewelry consignment office. They slid the velvet boxes across the counter. The clerk examined each piece carefully, wrote down figures, then handed them a printed sheet with values totaling $480,000. My grandma's jewelry, her history, her memory. All signed away for cash in under 10 minutes. The clerk said, "Do you want wire transfer or bank check?" My dad answered, without hesitation. Wire, faster. My uncle added, "Make it to North Harbor Investment Partners." The name struck me like an object thrown hard. My brother's failed venture, the one he had been trying desperately to resurrect, the one that had drained him emotionally for over a year. My brother whispered, "I did not know. I swear I did not know about this." His voice cracked. He tried to hide it, but it cracked anyway. The video shifted again. February 14th, 2023, 9:30 in the morning. My dad was on the phone in his office. He said, "She will never find out. The timing works. If anyone questions it, we tell them she had access. She was helping around the house. She must have moved something. People assume the quiet ones misplace things." The footage paused, and suddenly everything in the room felt off balance. Like the air was too thin. Like the edges of the table were sharper than they should be. Like the world had tilted, but no one had decided to acknowledge it. My brother pushed his chair back slightly, his breath uneven. He covered his face with his hands, pressing his palms hard into his eyes as if he were trying to erase the room. He said quietly, I thought you were mad at me. I thought the coldness was about me failing again. I did not know they were doing this. My dad snapped. Stop acting like a victim. You benefited too. You just did not have the courage to admit it. The lawyer turned toward my brother. There is no evidence your brother participated in this. My dad scoffed. He knew. He had to know. My brother lifted his head sharply. I did not. You kept everything from me. You always did. My dad's jaw tightened. Because you are weak. Because you break under pressure. Because you cannot handle responsibility. My brother's breath hitched. I did not ask for any of this. I did not want the company. I did not want the investment. I never wanted you to fix my mistakes. My mom tried to step in. This is not helping. We should discuss this later. But denial lost its power the moment the footage began. 6 months. 6 months of whispers. 6 months of me arriving at family dinners or small gatherings, feeling a kind of tension I could not explain. 6 months of being met with strange looks, subtle comments, small silences. 6 months of knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what. 6 months of being suspected quietly, politely, consistently by people who never asked, never confronted, never considered that the culprit might not have been the person who showed up the most. I had been the designated thief long before the jewelry disappeared. They only needed the right theft to make it official. I looked at my brother again. His shoulders shook once, then again, not dramatically, more like the beginning of a fracture. Then he spoke. I should have said something earlier. I should have asked why everyone was avoiding you. My dad glared. Keep your mouth shut. Do not make this worse. My brother shook his head. It is already worse. It has been worse for years. I just did not want to admit it. The lawyer allowed the silence to stretch. He understood the weight of recognition. He understood the moment a truth becomes unavoidable. My mother whispered, "We did what we had to do." I finally spoke. Did you really think I would never find out? It came out calmly. Too calmly. My dad looked at me like I had betrayed him, which was ironic considering the footage playing behind him had already done that far more efficiently. He said, "We protected this family. Everything we did was for us." I felt something inside me settle. A quiet resolve. A ledger finally balanced. The lawyer folded his hands. That concludes the sequence regarding the missing jewelry. The events and my uncle exhaled shakily. My mom sat down, staring at the table as if she could force it to swallow her whole. My dad looked everywhere except at the screen. My brother wiped his face once, quickly, as if ashamed of the tears. But he did not hide anymore. Not from me, not from them. He met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw something like an apology, something like grief. And underneath it, something like freedom. The truth had finally become louder than the fear, and for the first time all evening, I felt the room preparing to shift again. The dining room had settled into a silence so tight it felt like a sealed vault. My brother was still breathing unevenly beside me, my mom staring straight ahead, as if the tablecloth held answers she could memorize, and my dad gripping the arms of his chair with the tension of someone prepared to deny oxygen itself if it suited his argument. The lawyer closed the laptop halfway, not dismissing it, just creating enough pause for the next wave. And then the movement happened. 3 people at the far end of the table stood at once. I recognized them instantly, though I had never seen them in this house before tonight. Members of the board. My grandma's board. The board that she had built carefully over 4 decades, choosing people who valued integrity more than proximity. People who did not say yes for convenience. People she trusted. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a precise way of holding himself, stepped forward. His name was Howard Fletcher, Chief Financial Officer of Lowell Technologies, and one of the longest-standing members of the board. He folded his hands in front of him, and although his tone remained respectful, the weight behind it was unmistakable. He said, "Before we continue, we need to address another matter relevant to the estate and to the future of the company." My dad stiffened. This is not the place for corporate issues. We are dealing with family business. Howard looked at him calmly. The distinction no longer exists. Your actions at home affected the company. Your actions at the company affected your family. These matters intersect completely. My dad's face reddened. I am the acting chief executive officer. You do not speak above me. Howard remained composed. You are the acting chief executive officer. That distinction matters. Another board member, a woman named Ruth with a sharp, quietly intelligent expression, placed a folder on the table and opened it. The board has completed a 2-year audit covering financial activity from 2019 through 2024. The findings require immediate disclosure. My dad pushed back his chair. Absolutely not. You cannot present private board material in front of non-members, Howard responded. Per emergency protocol, we can, and we must. He turned slightly, addressing the room. The company has experienced irregularities totaling $3.9 million over the last 5 years. The number landed like a physical impact. Even my uncle, who had been trying to shrink into his chair since the jewelry footage, flinched. My dad barked, "You are misrepresenting account adjustments." Those were strategic reallocations. Ruth spoke next, her voice measured. The majority of these withdrawals were unauthorized. Several were funneled into accounts not tied to company operations. 2 were routed through shell corporations with no legitimate business purpose. And a substantial portion aligns with the timeline of personal financial strain documented within your family. My uncle's head dropped slightly, his guilt more visible than my dad's denial. He whispered, "We were going to fix it. We just needed time." Howard closed the folder. "We have allowed time. 5 years of it." My dad stood abruptly, palms flat on the table. "You do not get to accuse me without context. I built this company alongside my mother. I sacrificed for it. I protected it." Howard met his eyes. "You exploited it, and you endangered it. And someone has been repairing the damage behind you." My dad froze. "What are you talking about?" Ruth lifted another sheet from the folder. Starting in early 2023, the board began receiving anonymous alerts regarding discrepancies in quarterly statements, projections, and asset reports. Each alert included time-stamped corrections before the errors reached external auditors. My dad scoffed. Anonymous alerts. How convenient. Howard tapped the page lightly. Not anonymous to everyone. Your mother knew exactly who was sending them. She approved it. My stomach tightened. I felt something shifting toward me, but the board had not looked my way yet. They were building toward something, laying out each piece slowly, deliberately, like accountants presenting evidence line by line until the sum made them. Conclusion unavoidable. Ruth continued. Dozens of corrected entries were submitted. Altered expense ledgers. Fixed depreciation schedules. Repaired investment portfolio forecasts. Warning notes attached to inconsistencies in supply chain contracts and compliance documentation. The corrections consistently prevented exposure to regulatory penalties and preserved investor trust. My dad looked confused in a way I had not seen since I was a child. Who would do all of that? Who had access? Who understood the systems well? Enough, Howard turned his head. His gaze settled directly on me. She did. A soft murmur rose through the dining room. My dad blinked. Alex. As if the possibility was so foreign he could barely pronounce it. Ruth nodded. Every correction originated from your daughter's login credentials at hours, when no other team member was active. Midnight entries. Early morning reviews, weekend checks. Every pattern aligned with her schedule as an analyst. Her access level was appropriate for detection, but not for structural changes. She used what she had to protect the company. My mom's voice slipped out in a whisper. "You were working that much? Why did you never say anything?" I did not answer. I was not ready to open that door yet, not while the air still held every unsaid truth they had ignored for years. Howard, your grandmother told us you were the only one she trusted to look after them, company when she no longer could. She said you understood its foundation, not just its profit. She believed in your judgment. The lawyer remained silent. He knew this part was not his. The legal disclosures, the personal betrayals, the financial unraveling, everything intertwined into the real core of the night. My dad pointed at me. She barely understands the deeper mechanisms of the company. She was meddling. You should be thanking us for covering her mistakes. Howard shook his head. Her corrections prevented your decisions from destabilizing the company during a vulnerable transition. Your actions did not protect us. They put us at risk. My uncle spoke up weakly. We were under pressure. Investors were calling. We needed liquidity. Ruth looked at him. Pressure does not justify fraud. My dad snapped. It was not fraud. It was management. Howard opened another folder. $3.9 million is not management. And neither are false projections or concealed withdrawals. These are violations of fiduciary responsibility and breaches of ethics. My mom clasped her hands. We never wanted to harm anything. We only wanted to give Marcus a chance. My brother looked down sharply, his face rigid. Do not blame me for this. Do not use me as the excuse. The board members exchanged a glance. Something quiet passed between them. An unspoken decision, Howard said. In reviewing the audit trail, we found a pattern. Every time a discrepancy appeared, it was corrected within 24 hours. Every time a report was misaligned, the revised version came from the same place. Every time you risked the company's integrity, she intervened. His eyes met mine again. You have been protecting what your family was trying to destroy. The words struck deeper than I expected, not because they surprised me, but because they finally acknowledged what I had been doing in silence for years. Late nights alone in my apartment, recalculating projections, quiet warnings written into margins that no one read, choosing accuracy over credit, stability over recognition, doing it because the company mattered to my grandma, because it had been her life's work long before it was anyone else's. My dad's face shifted from denial to something harsher. She did this to undermine me. She sabotaged us, Howard replied. Then why were every one of her corrections in your favor? If she wanted to harm you, why did she save you from exposure each time? My dad opened his mouth, but no words came. My mom whispered to Kelly, "Why did you never tell us? You did all of that alone." I finally spoke, because it was not for you, it was for her. The room seemed to inhale. Even the lawyer looked up, his expression softened. I continued, "This company mattered to her. It was her legacy. And someone had to make sure it survived the decisions you were making in the dark." My dad sneered. "You think you understand legacy. You think you know what it takes to run a company. You do not have the strength for leadership," Howard said. "Strength is not the issue. Integrity is." The board member named Ruth spoke again. "All of your mother's concerns were documented. She anticipated tonight would escalate. She instructed us to remain present in case her estate was threatened by misrepresentation." My dad's posture stiffened again. "This is a family matter. You have no authority to intervene," Howard corrected him quietly. "We have full authority. Your mother's shares transferred into trust the moment she passed. Your position is no longer secure." My uncle sank deeper into his chair. My mom's breath grew unsteady. My dad's jaw clenched so hard I could see the strain from across the table. My brother whispered, "This is falling apart." But he was wrong. It was not falling apart. It was finally falling into place. Howard closed the folder with finality. "The board will convene privately after this meeting. But our priority was transparency. The truth had to be presented before this estate was resolved." I felt the weight of his words wrap around the room like a tightening band. No yelling, no accusations. Just the truth, delivered plainly, professionally, undeniably. The lawyer reopened his laptop. "There is one more segment before we proceed to the final disclosures." My dad muttered, "Enough of this." But even he sounded unsure. The board members remained standing, silent guardians of the truth my family had tried to bury. My grandma had orchestrated this, slowly, patiently, with the same precision she used to build her company. She had watched them strip pieces from her legacy. She had watched me shield it. And now all of it was being laid bare. The lawyer clicked the next file. The screen lit up again. The next video had barely begun to load when my brother pushed his chair back, so abruptly that the legs scraped the hardwood floor. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone looked at him. Even my dad stopped talking, which was rare enough to register as its own kind of shock. My brother pressed a hand to his chest as if he needed help holding himself upright. He was breathing too fast, too shallow, the way someone might when an old truth finally breaks loose inside them and forces its way out. He said, "Stop. I need to say something before anything else plays." My dad snapped, "Sit down. You will not make this worse." My brother flinched at the tone, but did not sit. "I cannot breathe, Dad. I cannot keep pretending." My mom reached out toward him. "Julian, honey, you are overwhelmed. Please sit. We can talk privately." He took a small step back, just enough that her hand missed his sleeve. "That is the problem, Mom. Everything in this family happens privately, quietly, behind people's backs. Nothing is real unless it benefits you and Dad. Everything else gets buried." My dad pointed at him. "You are talking nonsense. This is not your place." He looked at me then, and something in his expression cracked open. There was guilt, exhaustion, and something deeper I had never seen in him before. I realized he had been holding his breath for years. He said, "No, this is exactly my place. I have been part of this since I was a kid, even when I did not understand it, and I cannot carry it anymore." My dad's voice sharpened. "Julian." But my brother continued, louder now, as if he had finally found the volume he needed to speak his own truth. "All my life I was told I was the heir, the one who mattered, the one Grandma would trust, the one who would take over the company, carry the name, fix everything. But no one ever asked me if I wanted any of it." My mom tried again. "Your father worked hard so you could have a future." My brother gave a small, bitter laugh. "No, Mom. He worked hard to make sure I replaced her." He suddenly gestured toward me. A few heads turned, others froze. He said, "I know what you did. I know how you tried to rewrite this family. You acted like I was the center of everything, but it was just your way of erasing her. You made me part of that, even when I was a kid and had no idea what you were doing." My dad stood up now, voice rising. "That is not true. You were chosen because you were capable, because you listened, because you respected the family." My brother's voice broke at the edges. "I thought that was what families did." He wiped a trembling hand across his face and drew a breath that sounded painful. "I thought the pressure was normal. I thought panic attacks meant I was weak. I thought the way I could not sleep before quarterly reviews was because I was failing you. I did not know it was because I was living inside a role I was never meant to play." My mom whispered, "Julian, please stop this." He shook his head. "No, Mom, not this time. I have watched her be pushed aside since we were little. I watched you cut her out of photos. I heard the comments you made when you thought she was gone. I watched you blame her for everything that went wrong. And I stayed quiet because I was afraid of disappointing you. I stayed quiet because you always told me that loyalty meant silence." His eyes filled then, and he turned fully toward me. "I am sorry. I should have said something years ago. I should have stood up for you. I should have told you I saw everything, even when I tried to pretend I didn't." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Of all the things I had expected that night, my brother standing between me and the rest of the family was not one of them. He reached into his coat pocket then, pulling out a small flash drive. His hand shook as he placed it on the table in front of the lawyer. He said, "I have something else, something I kept because I was too scared to show it to anyone." My dad's face drained. "Julian, what did you do?" My brother did not look at him. I saved copies of Dad's emails. The ones where he talked about shifting funds. The ones where he discussed moving assets into off-record accounts. The ones where he told Uncle Noah the board would never notice if they adjusted the quarterly entries before audits. A stunned silence fell over the room. He continued. "At first I told myself I saved them because I wanted to protect Dad. That maybe there was context I did not understand. But really I saved them because a part of me knew this was going to break one day. And I thought if someone needed proof, I should have it." My dad moved around the table toward him. "Hand that over. You have no idea what you are meddling with." My brother stepped back. "No, Dad, I am not handing it to you. I am handing it to them because they deserve the truth. And she deserves the truth. And Grandma deserved better than what you turned her company into. The lawyer reached forward and retrieved the flash drive carefully, as if it might burn through the table. He placed it beside his laptop and nodded once at my brother. My mom covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were wide, her face ashen. She whispered, "What has happened to you?" My brother looked at her with a sadness that felt older than either of us. "Nothing happened to me, Mom. I just finally stopped pretending." My dad glared at him. "You are betraying your own family." My brother's voice steadied. "No, I am refusing to participate in a lie." He turned to me again. "I know this does not fix everything. I know it does not erase how alone you were. But I am here now, and I am not sitting down." For a moment, no one breathed. The air felt thick, suspended, waiting for something to snap. Then my mom's shoulders collapsed inward. The sound she made was not loud, not dramatic. It was a soft, broken exhale, like someone realizing their entire world had been built on ground that was already cracking. She sank back into her chair, covering her face. My dad tried to catch her arm, but she pulled away. "Please, do not touch me. Not now." It was the first time I had ever heard her say no to him. My uncle muttered something under his breath and stood, pacing in a tight circle before dropping back into his seat. Someone at the far end of the table murmured nervously. A cousin whispered, wide-eyed, asking if any of this was really happening. The board members looked on with silent, grave focus. And through it all, my brother stood beside me, shoulders squared, chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. But he stayed. This was not the boy they groomed. This was not the heir they tried to build. This was my brother, the one I had always hoped still existed beneath the weight they put on him. I finally spoke, my voice quiet. "Thank you." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I should have done it sooner." Behind us, my dad hissed, "You are throwing your life away." My brother did not turn around. "Maybe, but at least it is mine now." The room spiraled into chaos then. My mom is crying softly. My dad demanded explanations. My uncle was arguing with someone across the table. Whispered accusations, confusion, fear, grief. Every suppressed emotion that had lived in this family for years erupted at once. But in the middle of it, my brother stood steady. For the first time, he was not holding his breath. And for the first time, I felt something like air move through my own lungs. The lawyer lifted the flash drive again, confirming its importance without words. The board leaned in. The night was not finished, not by a long stretch, but the axis had shifted. My brother, the one who had been shaped into everything I was not, had just chosen a side. And it was mine. The lawyer tapped his keyboard, opening the next file, and the room stilled just enough for whatever came next to settle over us. My Aunt Linda was the one who rose next, not abruptly the way my brother had, not with a kind of breathless urgency that rattles a room. She stood slowly, deliberately, like someone who had practiced this moment in her mind for years, and had finally decided she was done rehearsing. Her chair eased back against the polished floor, and for a second, no one noticed except me. Maybe because my dad was still arguing with the lawyer under his breath. Maybe because my mom sat silently crying into her fingers. Maybe because the rest of the family was too stunned to process anything beyond the last few minutes. But I noticed. I noticed the way she straightened her blazer, the way she folded her hands together, then released them, the way her jaw stayed tight but her eyes softened, not at the room, but at me. She said I need to speak. My dad whipped his head toward her. "Linda, sit down. This is not the time for theatrics." She did not move. "Theatrics is what you do, not me." The room stilled again, in that brittle way where every piece of air tilts toward one person. My aunt had always stayed quiet around my dad, not out of respect, but out of survival. Seeing her push back now was like watching a supporting beam shift in a house, revealing all the strain it had held for decades. She said I should have spoken earlier. Years earlier. But I was a coward, and I am not proud of it. My mom lowered her hand slightly, eyes swollen, mascara blurred. "Linda, please, not tonight." My aunt ignored her. "I was erased long before she was, before your daughter ever took her first breath." My dad scoffed, This again. That issue was settled 20 years ago. She turned toward him fully. No, it was buried. There is a difference. She inhaled, held the breath, then let it go, with the steadiness of someone who had made peace with whatever would come next. She said 20 years ago, when Grandma prepared her first major revision of the family will. I was supposed to be included. You and I both were. I was her daughter, her second-born, and for a moment, it felt like she saw me. And then you convinced her I was unstable. My dad slammed his palm on the table. I never said that. Her voice deepened, sadness wrapping around each word. You did. Maybe not in those exact terms, but you played it cleverly. You hinted. You suggested I could not handle responsibility. You reminded her of my postpartum depression. You used my weakest moments to argue I was a liability. My mom whispered I did not know that. My aunt's eyes flicked to her. You did. You just did not want to deal with it. My mom looked down at her lap. My aunt continued. I was cut out quietly. No announcement. No explanation. I only found out because the lawyer at the time mistakenly sent me a copy. When I confronted Grandma, she said she trusted you. She said she was doing what was best for the family. And I lost more that day than money. I lost my place, my identity, my mother's trust. She paused, her breath trembling now. And I blamed your daughter for it, not because she had anything to do with it, but because bitterness needs a place to land. And she was the easiest target. She was too quiet, too polite, too willing to let everyone else take up space. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. My aunt looked directly at me. I am sorry, truly. I took out 20 years of resentment on someone who had never harmed me. I see that now. I have seen it for years. I just did not have the courage to admit it. For the first time since Christmas dinner had begun, my grandma lifted her hand for silence. Her fingers were thin, fragile, marked with veins and time. But when she raised that hand, the entire room went still. Even my dad stopped speaking. She looked at my aunt with a sadness that seemed older than both of them. I made a grave mistake. I let my son influence me in ways I should never have allowed. I trusted the wrong person. My dad let out a dry laugh. So now I am the villain. How convenient. My grandma did not even turn toward him. Villains are not born. They are revealed. He opened his mouth, but the look she gave him was enough to silence him. She continued. Linda, I am sorry for what I did to you. You were not unstable. You were overwhelmed. You were a young mother who needed support. And instead, you were punished for being human. My aunt's lips parted as though she might respond, but emotion closed her throat. My grandma nodded toward the lawyer. Bring me the amendment. My dad lunged forward. Mother, no, not now. This is not the place for rewriting history. She finally turned her head toward him. David, the place for truth is always exactly where the lies were spoken. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a crisp envelope, and set it on the table. He explained quietly that this amendment had been prepared months ago, but not. Yet read aloud, because my grandmother wanted the family present. My aunt trembled. Mother, what are you doing? My grandma leaned slightly toward her, correcting something I should have corrected 20 years ago. She looked at the lawyer again. Read it. He unfolded the document and began, his voice steady in the hush. He read that a portion of the estate, designated 20 years earlier, had been restored to my aunt. That she would now receive not only the asset value originally intended for her, but an additional sum reflecting the years of exclusion. That she would hold a formal advisory role within the family trust. That her daughter's education funds, long dismissed, had been reinstated. My aunt covered her mouth, tears slipping between her fingers. Her daughter Jessica, sitting further down the table, let out a small sound, somewhere between relief and disbelief. My dad exhaled sharply. So that is it. You are rewriting the entire family structure in one night. My grandma looked at him with a look so tired and so disappointed it made something deep in me ache. I am not rewriting anything. I am acknowledging what was already true and what you worked tirelessly to hide. He shook his head, voice shaking with restrained fury. You are letting emotions take over. This is not rational. A faint smile ghosted across her face. For someone who spent years insisting I was losing my judgment, you seem very upset that I have finally regained it. A few people around the table shifted uncomfortably. My aunt lowered her hands, wiping her cheeks. Mother, I do not want to take anything away from anyone. I just wanted acknowledgement. My grandma's expression softened. You are not taking anything. You are receiving what was yours all along. Then her gaze moved across the table and found mine. Her voice changed then, not louder, but clearer. And let me be perfectly understood. The decisions being made tonight are mine, not yours, not his, not anyone else's. My dad clenched his jaw, but he stayed silent. She continued. For years I watched, I listened, I waited. I allowed myself to believe that time would reveal the truth. And it has. Every action you took, every whisper, every alteration of the trust, every quiet cruelty, every framed accusation has brought us here. Her eyes drifted slowly across the room, landing briefly on each person before returning to me. And now it is my turn to speak plainly. What happens next, all of it, begins and ends with me. A hum of electricity moved through the room, subtle but unmistakable. There was no shouting now, no overlapping accusations. Even my dad seemed unsure of his footing. My aunt sat down again, shoulders shaking, but with a kind of weary relief that suggested a weight had finally shifted off her spine. I watched my grandma, realizing something I had never fully allowed myself to see. She had not been passive. She had not been oblivious. She had not been weak. She had been choosing her moment. The lawyer closed the amendment folder carefully, as if sealing something sacred back inside it. Chairs creaked lightly as people adjusted, trying to make sense of the new shape the night had taken. And then my grandma took a slow sip of water, her hand steady despite her age. When she set the glass down, she looked at me again, eyes full of something I could not name yet. She said, "We are not finished." And the room held its breath all over again. Detective Harper stepped forward as my grandma's words settled across the table like a final ledger entry. Until that moment, I had barely registered her presence. She blended in easily, dressed in a simple navy sweater and dark slacks, hair tied back. The kind of woman you might mistake for a distant cousin or one of my aunts, friends dragged to dinner out of politeness. But when she reached into her pocket and unfolded a small wallet, the room stiffened. She said, "My name is Detective Leah Harper with the Essex County Financial Crimes Division. I am here in an official capacity." My dad's face tightened so quickly I almost heard it. "You invited the police into our home." Detective Harper corrected him calmly. "Your mother invited me, months ago." My grandma nodded once. "I wanted someone present who was not under your influence." My dad opened his mouth, but Detective Harper continued before he could build momentum. "I have been reviewing irregularities connected to your company for the last 8 months. Tonight confirms much of what we suspected, but I am here to observe, not to arrest anyone at this table. Not yet." My mom exhaled shakily, as though she had been holding her breath for the last hour. My dad was less relieved. His shoulders curled inward, tense, calculating. Detective Harper placed a discreet recorder on the table. "This is not a raid. This is documentation. Nothing more. But moving forward, there will be interviews, subpoenas, a full audit." She turned her eyes toward my Uncle Noah. "And you will both need legal representation soon." My uncle muttered insecurities under his breath, something about misinterpretation, but she didn't respond. She was not here to comfort or negotiate. She simply logged reality the way a financial analyst logs transactions. Quiet, precise, unemotional. My dad raised his chin. "You cannot prove intent. Not tonight. This footage is taken out of context." Detective Harper glanced at him with a level stare. "Intent is built over time. You have provided years of context." A subtle murmur rippled through the table. My brother lowered himself back into his chair. My aunt held her daughter's hand. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked, nerves settling into place, like dust after a collapse. Detective Harper looked around. "I will be coordinating with the board for a full review. That includes all financial documents, records of transfers, and communications between any executives involved." Her attention shifted to me next. "And I will speak with you privately within the next week. Your involvement appears to be corrective rather than participatory. I nodded, unsure how to respond. I had not expected to become part of an investigation, but in some strange way, it felt inevitable. Numbers do not lie. They only wait. My grandma's voice wove through the room again, steady and thin. Thank you, detective. That will be all for tonight. The detective gave a small nod, closed her recorder, and stepped back to the wall, resuming her quiet observation. The lawyer cleared his throat softly and adjusted his glasses. There is one more matter we must address before the family disperses. The board has made a provisional recommendation. I felt my stomach lift slightly, as if the ground under me shifted again. He looked at me. You have been acting in the company's best interest for years without credit or authority. Because of that, the board is prepared to offer you a 6-month interim CEO position. During that time, leadership decisions will be evaluated, and at the end of the term, a permanent appointment will be made. My breath caught. Not dramatically. Just enough that the air felt heavier going in. My brother looked at me with a stunned but proud expression, as if a door had opened in a hallway neither of us knew existed. My mom covered her lips with trembling fingers. She is too young. The lawyer responded before I could. Age is not the metric. Competence is. My dad barked a humorless laugh. She is not capable of running a corporation of this scale. I felt his words more as familiarity than injury. I had been underestimated for so long that his dismissal read almost as habit rather than revelation. The lawyer folded his hands. Fortunately, the board disagrees. All eyes returned to me. My heart beat slow and steady, like a metronome keeping time in a dim room. I said I need time to think. The lawyer nodded. Of course, you are not required to accept tonight. But my dad was not finished. Think all you want. You will fail. You do not understand the pressure, the responsibility, the expectations. For once, his words did not make my pulse rise. Instead, there was a quiet recognition deep inside me. Every sentence he'd ever spoken through my childhood, my teenage years, even my adult life had been some variation of that theme. Doubt dressed as guidance, control disguised as expertise. I looked at him fully. I have been cleaning up your mistakes for years without anyone knowing. I think I understand pressure just fine. His face went still, not with anger, but shock, as though he finally realized I had been awake the entire time he assumed I was sleeping. My mom spoke next, voice brittle. Honey, your dad has sacrificed so much. He was only trying to protect the company and our family. I steadied my breath. Protecting something means preserving it, not siphoning from it. She flinched, the truth landing gently but firmly. My uncle leaned forward, jabbing a finger in my direction. This is a family matter. Outsiders should not get a say. Detective Harper lifted her eyebrows slightly from her place against the wall. Financial crimes are rarely just a family matter. My uncle's mouth snapped shut. I turned back to my dad and mom. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was standing at the child's end of the table. I felt like someone speaking from her own ground, not borrowed from them. I said, I am not here to punish you. I am not going to scream or accuse you of anything, but I will no longer carry the weight of your decisions. My dad blinked. Meaning what? To my own surprise, the words came easier than I expected. Meaning you will answer to investigators without me. Meaning I will not shield you from the consequences. Meaning if I choose to take the CEO position, I will not consider your preferences or your legacy. And meaning if you want a relationship with me in the future, it will not be built on silence or fear. My mom whispered, "We are your parents." I nodded gently. And I am your daughter, not your scapegoat, not your replacement for whatever image you wish you still had. If you want to be in my life, the door is open. But I am not walking back through yours the way it used to be. My dad sat down as though gravity had changed, heavier than before. My mom looked fragile, uncertain, as if she had stepped outside and discovered the weather had shifted while she wasn't paying attention. My aunt's eyes glistened. My brother looked at me with something close to awe, and my grandma held my gaze with a quiet, knowing pride. The lawyer collected his papers. Conversations around the table dissolved into softer tones, people speaking in pairs, small clusters forming and breaking apart. The board members spoke quietly with Detective Harper near the corner. My uncle sat rigid and silent. My cousins exchanged nervous glances. I stayed in my chair, letting the room breathe. The emotions swirled, but not inside me. They moved around me, like a storm I was no longer part of. Eventually, my grandma extended her hand toward me. I moved to her side, taking it gently, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath the thin blanket draped across her legs. She said, "Are you all right, my dear?" I answered honestly, "I do not know." She smiled softly, the way someone does when they already understand the truth you cannot yet articulate. "It is enough that you are here." I nodded, steadying myself, feeling the shape of the night settle into place. There were consequences ahead. Investigations, decisions, shifts in power and family and future. But for the first time, none of it felt like revenge. It felt like accounting. Every entry is finally balanced. Every hidden cost was finally brought to light. Someone cleared the dinner plates quietly. Chairs scraped across the floor as people rose. The lights in the dining room dimmed slightly as the house adjusted to the late hour. I stayed beside my grandma, holding her hand, letting the silence form a bridge between what had been revealed and what still waited. The lawyer approached gently. "There is one more document to review when you are ready." I nodded, not yet standing. "In a moment." He stepped away, giving me space. And as the voices around the room softened into scattered threads, I looked at my dad and mom one more time. I did not feel anger. I did not feel triumph. Only clarity. There would be fallout. There would be an inquiry. There would be choices I had yet to make, but the account had finally opened in my name, and nothing would ever return to the way it was. I spent the next year learning how to breathe in air that finally belonged to me. It happened slowly, and then all at once. The way seasons shift in Massachusetts. One morning you wake up and realize the ice on the trees has thinned, the light has changed, and something in you has changed with it. The company stabilized faster than anyone predicted. Maybe because the board no longer had to work around my dad's decisions. Maybe because the employee freed. Maybe because I stopped treating myself like an understudy and finally stepped into the part I had been performing in secret for years. I spent those months learning how to lead without breaking myself in half. I asked questions. I analyzed risks. I made mistakes and corrected them. I earned trust, not through pressure, but clarity. There were days I walked into the corner office and felt like a child wearing someone else's coat. There were other days I looked out over the harbor through the tall windows and felt my brother carved out his own path too. He walked away from the business world entirely, declined every role the board tried to offer him, and moved into a small art studio in Salem. He sent me photos sometimes, half-finished canvas pieces, colors I never knew he carried inside him. He said painting made him feel like he could breathe without permission. I understood that better than he knew. We did not talk about our parents often, not because we were pretending they had not existed in the shape they was once held, but because the distance was no longer painful. It was simply reality, like a column on an old ledger that had finally been written off. They attended mandatory meetings with investigators. They sent a few messages to me here and there, each one softer than the last, each one suspended between apology and hope. I did not ignore them, but I did not return to the silence that once passed for peace. I answered with the boundaries I had built, and over time, they stopped trying to bend them. My aunt flourished too. She joined the advisory board the spring after everything happened. I watched her rediscover parts of herself she had buried years earlier. Sometimes I wondered if I was seeing the woman she might have become if no one had ever tried to erase her. There was something beautiful in that. But the chapter that changed me most began 6 months after Christmas. On a June afternoon when the ocean wind carried the scent of warm salt and grass through the open windows of my grandma's room. I found her sitting near the window, wrapped in a soft shawl, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. She looked smaller than she once had, but not diminished. More distilled, like everything unnecessary had fallen away, leaving only the strongest outlines of who she had always been. She said, "Come sit, my dear. You look tired." I sat beside her, resting my hands in my lap. "It is good, tired. But yes, it has been a long week." She smiled, her eyes sharper than her body allowed. "Work will do that. Purpose will do that. But you carry it well." I hesitated. "Are you feeling all right today?" She did not answer quickly. Instead, she gazed out toward the water, where sunlight broke into little pieces across the surface. I am feeling complete. That is enough. Something inside me tightened. I knew what she was saying, even if she did not say it directly. Her health had been fragile for months. The treatments were gentle, but draining. Some mornings, she could not walk without assistance. But her spirit was steady, anchored by something I could not yet name. She touched my hand. There is something I want you to know before time slips too far ahead of me. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. Anything. She took a slow breath, as though she were searching for a memory she had carried for too long. When I was a girl, not much older than you were when you first learned what silence felt like, my own parents decided I did not belong. I was not obedient enough, not useful enough, not male. They made it clear that my life had value only if it supported theirs. I stared at her. I had never heard her speak about her childhood beyond a few brief stories. You never told me that. Her smile was faint, but not sad. Some truths only matter when they reach the right ears. She looked down at her folded hands. They erased me long before anyone could see it. They spoke over me, ignored my success, blamed me for their disappointments. When I left home at 18, I was not running toward anything. I was escaping a place that refused to see me. She paused, then met my eyes. When I watched your father raise you, I recognized the pattern. I saw the way he diminished you, the way he withheld praise, the way he spoke your name as though it were an inconvenience, and I knew exactly where he learned it. My breath caught slightly. You mean from them? She nodded once. Erasure travels through families the way some debts do, passed quietly, paid unknowingly. If no one challenges it, it becomes tradition. I felt something twist inside me. Not pain, but recognition. Why didn't you stop it sooner? Her voice softened. Because I thought you were stronger than I had been. And you were. You survived quietly. You learned to read people, to read rooms, to protect yourself in ways I never could. But there came a point when I realized you were not just surviving. You were disappearing inside the silence they expected from you. And I could not watch that happen again. She exhaled slowly. So I prepared. I documented. I waited. I built a path for you to walk if you ever decided to take it. But you had to choose it yourself. That was important. I felt a warm pressure rise behind my eyes. You gave me back my life. She shook her head slightly. No. I simply gave you the truth. You built the rest. We sat together in a quiet that felt like its own language. Outside, the waves rolled and folded, steady as breath. Her hand rested lightly over mine. Her skin warm, but fragile. A few gulls called overhead. The house creaked softly with the afternoon wind. After a long moment, she said, "Promise me one thing." I leaned closer. "Of course." She smiled, the lines around her mouth deepening with tenderness. "Do not spend your life proving them wrong. Spend it becoming someone you recognize." I nodded, unable to speak. The last time I saw her awake was 3 weeks later. She was resting in the same chair, eyes closed, sunlight touching her face like a blessing. She opened her eyes when she heard me enter. She lifted her hand. I held it. She whispered something I will carry for the rest of my life. She said, "I am not leaving you. I am letting you go." She passed quietly the next morning. No struggle, no fear. Just a gentle exhale, as if she had stepped from one room into another. The memorial was small, the way she wanted. My brother read a poem he had written. My aunt cried openly. Even my parents stood apart from the group, humble in a way I had never seen before. There were no grand speeches, no elaborate praises, just people who loved her, gathered around the truth she had lived. After the service, I walked alone down the path toward the bluff overlooking the ocean. The tide was low. The rocks glistened with salt. The wind brushed against my shoulders as if reminding me of the weight I no longer carried. I looked out at the water and understood something I had not been ready to understand earlier. I did not win because they lost. I did not rise because they fell. I did not reclaim my life because I sought revenge. I survived because I refused to vanish. I existed, fully, in the open, without apology, without permission. I walked back up the path feeling lighter, not triumphant, but grounded. This life I had now, this voice, this work, this freedom, it was not built on what they took from me. And maybe that was the quietest and loudest justice of all. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this. Silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.